first of all check that everyone is on mute. Hopefully you can all be on mute, except the speakers. That would be great. And then just to very quickly run us through the agenda, a brief outline of this. I'm pleased to say that we have Lord Carnwath on the line, and he will be speaking with Joss Saunders. Then we have a little bit of an introduction to the history of LAP, how we started out, from our wonderful new Chief Executive, Emma Lough. Then we are going to have a number of speakers just to talk about some of the areas that we work in, and I'll introduce those as we go through the evening. So first of all, I would just like to hand over to Emma, who is going to give us a quick introduction, and then she will introduce Lord Carnwath and Joss. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks very much, Richard, and thank you everyone for joining the event this evening to mark what is a really exciting moment for Lawyers Against Poverty. And I certainly personally am delighted to be joining the organisation at a time where we have the opportunity looking ahead to really build on what's been accomplished over the past 5 years since it was set up as an Oxfam initiative, during which time LAP has supported projects around the world which have ranged from strategic litigation to improve women's rights in Nigeria to legal assistance for refugees in the camps in Lesbos. And since LAP's beginnings, its members have, by gift of money to our Justice Fund or time through volunteering, supported projects that use the law as a tool for social action. And as we look ahead, we look very much to build on this foundation. So while this is the launch of LAP as an independent organisation, it's not the beginning or by any means the end of our story. And what began as a group of lawyers wanting to do more has already become a committed community of active volunteers, no longer willing to tolerate the inevitability of global inequality. And what we see ahead of us is a strong, resilient, outward-looking movement of social justice advocates willing to listen, learn, speak up, and most importantly, take action. So with our launch, and particularly in light of the year that we've had, we have the opportunity in this moment to look at the world around us and really reflect on what lawyers can do wherever they are in the world, whatever stage of their career, and in whatever field of practice, to use the skills, the passion, the expertise, and the resources within the legal community to tackle poverty and inequality head on. And with the belief that there is an enormous amount of untapped potential, we're focusing our efforts on the routes that we hope can strengthen the collective power of lawyers to push back against poverty and speak with a single voice to make it clear that injustice is non-negotiable. The main ways in which we hope to do this is by building a sense of community through our events and special interest groups to encourage all members to come together and to connect on the issues that really matter to them. And we also do this by creating collaborative learning environments through our collective projects and our partnership work, where members can come together and gain insights. And finally, we also do this by facilitating programs that enable people to stand up and take action as proactive volunteers and do their bits as lawyers in society. So we hope that those of you who aren't yet members will join the movement, and for those of you who are, that you'll redouble your commitments to our shared vision of a legal community that is active and effective in stamping out injustice. So through our Justice Fund that is supported by contributions from our members, we will continue to support projects focused on improving access to justice around the world. And I'm delighted that you'll be hearing from one of LAP's current grantees from the Justice Centre for Legal Aid in Jordan later this evening. And through our projects that have been both launched and led by our members, we offer opportunities for people to give their time and expertise, be it through organising or research, training or mentoring, to get actively involved in tackling social injustice. And some of these we're excited to share with you today. So later in the session, you'll be able to hear more about our refugee legal confidence sessions launched by Baroness Hale earlier this year, which offer an innovative model of legal education on issues from voting and housing law to family and criminal justice. You'll also hear about our twinning programme, which matches lawyers in different regions as peer mentors to share experiences and to learn from one another's practice. And finally, from our Junior Lawyers Network, which supports student groups to organise events, projects, blog competitions, and fundraising drives. And we're excited to announce this evening, soon also to include a mentorship programme. So with all of that, I very much hope that you'll support us in our mission and also enjoy the event this evening. And we're very thankful to welcome Lord Carnwath to speak with LAP's co-founder, Joss Saunders, about the role of lawyers in the fight for climate justice.
Thank you very much, Emma. If I could invite Lord Carnwath to switch on his video as well. Thank you so much for joining us. So this is the slight flavour of this bit of the evening is kind of desert island discs, but sadly without the music. I'm going to interview Lord Carnwath, one of our leading justices from the Supreme Court, and who's, as we'll see, been involved in some of the leading cases in relation to environmental law. And just before we start, I should say that climate change has been an important theme for Lawyers Against Poverty since the beginning, but acquires an added importance in the light of the climate change conference that's happening in Glasgow that should have been happening right now, but has been postponed because of COVID-19 to next year. So the preparation for that, I'm anticipating, will be a big theme for the Lawyers Against Poverty for next year. And we're absolutely delighted that Lord Carnwath has been able to join us this evening. He very kindly came and talked to our Oxford Lawyers Against Poverty group some time ago, and we're delighted that he's back with us this evening. So Lord Carnwath, you've become very well known for your passion for addressing climate change as an issue. I wonder if you could start off by telling us how you became interested in climate change.
Oh, thank you, Joss, and thank you for the introduction. And can I just say, before I come to your question, how honoured I am to be sort of included in this launch session. I mean, I think I feel rather humble looking at the sort of work that your lawyers group do around the world on all sorts of issues, because in a way, in the Supreme Court, one's rather distant from what goes on the ground. And so I'm thrilled that this is now being launched as a separate organisation. As far as climate change is concerned, I suppose I'm not unusual in having got into this quite late, I suppose. But looking back, I think, of course, an important point was the American election in 2000, when a lot of us saw that Al Gore was going to be the one who really understood about this and was going to take things forward. And it's amazing to think that he was defeated by a few votes in Florida. And then, you know, here we are 20 years on. Half the American public still vote for someone who doesn't believe that climate change is a real issue. So I felt all that time how important it is. I began to get involved in sort of environmental issues more broadly in 2003 and 4, when after the global conference in South Africa, the Environment Conference in Johannesburg, they had what was called a Global Judges Symposium. And I was selected by the then Lord Chief Justice, Lord Wolf, to represent this country in a task force set up by the UN Environment Programme to take forward judicial training in environmental issues. And that's carried on since. More recently, in 2015, where ahead of the Paris conference, I thought there was a need to sort of focus attention on what lawyers could do and judges could do for climate change. And we organized a conference in London on that theme, with part of which was held in the Supreme Court and with the support of the Foreign Office. And so really I've carried on since then. And now, since I retired in March this year, it seemed to me that there's an enormous opportunity, as you said, Joss, with COP26 coming up, to really focus on these issues again.
Thank you. I think there's several themes that come up there which are going to be useful for us as we plan our activities over the next year. I mean, one that you've identified is the role of judges and lawyers. And as we'll hear a little bit later on, we have a twinning program, and we'll be adopting a mentoring program. And part of what Lawyers Against Poverty is about is linking lawyers who are in different situations, but all as practicing lawyers or people with an interest in law across the world. And so the idea that practicing lawyers, people in the legal community, judges in a country like the UK can assist and work with and mentor and be mentored by and twin with lawyers in a country like Malawi or Zambia or Tajikistan, to name some of the countries we've been involved with, is I think incredibly moving, and I'm looking forward to hearing about those later on. If I could turn now to your days on the Supreme Court, I'm particularly interested in the Client Earth case that you were involved with, where you delivered the judgment of the Supreme Court, both the first time round in 2013 and again when it came back from the European Court of Justice in 2015. And one commentator has described that case as the most important environmental or public health case in our generation, or perhaps ever in the UK, and not necessarily globally, but that's pretty amazing statement. And at the time when you delivered the first judgment, you noted that 29,000 people were dying a year prematurely because of excess nitrogen dioxide in the UK. And since then, the figures seem to have gone up. And one of the studies from King's College London, I think, shows it might be as many as 70 or 80,000. So that case has been incredibly important for environmentalists and public health lawyers. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that case and perhaps any learning that you think there may be from the quite extraordinary orders that were made in that case for how Lawyers Against Poverty and lawyers generally who care about the environment, who care about climate change, can actually think about these issues.
Well, I mean, I think it was an important case. I wish I could say that it's achieved everything we hoped it would achieve. I mean, I noted today in the newspapers that there's an inquest is being held to see whether someone's death was caused by pollution. We haven't solved the problem by any means. I think there were two very important things. The first was the importance of clear standards. I mean, we got those from Europe, but I mean, at least what you had was firm, clear standards, and you could tell whether they were being complied with or not. There was no muddling around about that. And we had the reference to Europe was really to make sure that this was something which we as a national court should be dealing with rather than leaving it to the European Commission. Well, now from next year, of course, there'll be no doubt that it's the job of the UK courts to do that. And one of the big issues about the Environment Bill is how we're going to make sure we do that. But the other, I think in terms of orders, you mentioned the orders, I was particularly concerned giving the lead judgment that we shouldn't just say, well, the government had got it wrong. We should actually make sure that there was some sort of pressure on them to get it right. And so we made an order requiring them to produce revised plans within 9 months, I think it was. But we delegated, as it were, to the administrative court the job of supervising that. And in fact, then went back twice, I think, to the administrative court with Client Earth saying, well, this isn't good enough. Now, I'm not sure quite where that's got to, but it does. I think the lesson we learn about that is that we, and I hope this is something which might be looked at in the current judicial review panel, is that we need to have more flexible remedies so that we don't just make an order saying something's unlawful. We actually give judicial supervision to what takes place after that. And I suspect in the context of climate change, we may well be finding arguments coming up about the adequacy of the government's plans. And, I don't want to anticipate cases that may or may not come up, but I do think this is going to be an important tool, the ability to make orders which can have continuing effect.
Thank you. I think one of the interesting things I pick up from that is the importance of the judiciary in thinking about the kind of orders that can work, the sort of dialogic approach to justice, if you like, that happens not just in this country, but in other countries. And in fact, one of our trustees, who I hope is on our call this evening, Caroline Ndindi from Nairobi, was actually very involved in a conference which Lawyers Against Poverty helped to fund last year in Nairobi, where the Chief Justice of Kenya was speaking. We had lawyers and judges from across Africa talking about these issues and the fact of the importance of learning internationally about exactly these kind of remedies.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, it's not enough just to say to the government, sorry, this isn't good enough. We have to be able to go further.
Yes. Well, I think that's interesting you mentioned that example, because I've been in touch with actually as judges in Kenya, because they were due to have a conference, I think, next month on climate change and the law, which has had to be postponed. But I was interested how they sort of in turn learn from the experience of the Indian and Pakistani courts, which have been on the whole very proactive with this. So I think one of the things I've been very keen in my exchanges with judges around the world is to sort of see to what extent we can learn from each other.
Yeah. I mean, we're not focusing particularly on COVID-19 tonight. You'll be pleased to hear. But actually, our last event that we held before we became an independent charity was looking at exactly this issue about international learning from court to court in relation to COVID-19 and human rights. And as you say, the Indian courts have had a huge influence on the African courts, but in turn, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has had a huge influence in environmental law in relation to land rights, which is a very closely related theme. So it's really exciting, I think, that some of our members have been able to get involved in these issues. And in fact, we'll hear later from our junior Lawyers Against Poverty groups. And one of the first things that we did with junior Lawyers Against Poverty groups in universities is got them involved writing and researching the impact of legal cases where you could learn from one country to another. So I think it's a great theme for us to focus on.
Can I just say one thing about that? I mean, I think it's very important. I mean, for example, the Client Earth case, pollution, I was told by people in Client Earth, they've used that as a sort of precedent in other countries in Europe. And but I think we need to concentrate on the key cases. I mean, I think one of the dangers about legal research nowadays is there are far too many cases and far too diffuse. And you find yourself looking at lists of so-called climate change cases. Most of them are quite unremarkable and don't actually seem to be going anywhere. Well, there are some really key ones, like the Leghari case in Pakistan, and the Agenda case, which do provide a real model on which you can build.
Well, of course, some of our members were very involved with the Agenda case. So I think it is interesting. I mean, you don't know which cases are going to be the important ones until, of course, after they've happened quite often. But if I may ask you, we've mentioned already the climate change conference coming up next year, in fact, almost this time next year in Glasgow. Having been involved, as you said, with climate change issues since 2003 and those early days, the conference in Johannesburg that you mentioned and so on, and looking at how things have developed over the last 15, 20 years, what would your advice be to Lawyers Against Poverty, to young lawyers, to lawyers who want to get involved in climate change issues, with next year as a big opportunity to raise the profile of the issues? What do you think we should be looking at in relation to the law and climate change over the next year?
Well, I think there are sort of various different levels to that. I mean, one of the things that I've learned since I sort of put my head above the parapet earlier this year and expressed an interest in getting involved with lawyers concerned with climate change was how many organizations, how many lawyers, how many groups there are at all levels around the world who are actually taking an interest. And I think the most important thing is in your everyday work and advising clients is to have climate change issues at the forefront of your mind, and that may be issues about mitigation or adaptation, all sorts of things. I think at the sort of UK level, I would love to be able to draw together some of the threads, and I'm looking to see how we can have a sort of some conferences next year, which will draw together the threads of people who are working in the law on climate change issues, whether at the sort of basic level of advising or the judicial level or whatever. And so that's something which I met Richard Dyton as a result of that, and I've met a number of people who are doing very, very interesting work. So I think somehow we've got to try and coordinate that.
Great. And I should say that with Lawyers Against Poverty and this idea, it's a very inclusive model in which everybody's encouraged to get involved. That our definition of lawyer is very broad. It's people involved in law and in the business of law, which of course includes many people who are not necessarily and very often are not qualified lawyers, but have an interest in law or work in the business of law. And that can be paralegals, that can be support staff. One of the really exciting things that we've been looking at doing over the years, and particularly over recent months, is actually making short films. In which actually the people with the skills in how to do that are not necessarily primarily bringing their legal skill, they're bringing their skill as communicators, using things like YouTube. I think it's a great opportunity which gets everybody involved.
Yes, I mean, if I can take that a stage further, I imagine that people who are listening to this and lawyers in your network have their own ideas of what could be that they could do or what others could do in relation to climate change. And I don't know whether it's possible within your structure to set up some sort of chat line or some sort of thing where one can actually exchange and assemble ideas, because it'd be very useful to have a stock of ideas coming out from the grassroots, which one can then take forward and disseminate.
That's great. Well, you're giving us a full agenda for next year, so thank you very much. Lord Carnwath, I've just got one final question to you to bring us back to the desert island discs, which is I can't ask you what luxury you would bring, but if I could ask you if you had one change in the law that you could bring in helping address climate change, just one wish, what would that be?
Well, I think as long as I'm allowed to look beyond this country, I would like every country to be committed in law to a defined legal target. And, we've now got a net zero by 2050. I mean, some will say that's not good enough, some will say it's impossible, and so on. But it seems to me it's a simple, clear message. And if one effect of the COP26 was that more nations of the world, as many nations as possible in the world, committed themselves in law to something like that, that I think would make me a happier man than I am now.
Wonderful. Well, perhaps one of the things that Lawyers Against Poverty may be able to help with through things like the twinning program we've been talking about is helping lawyers in countries with perhaps not quite as large a legal profession, not quite as well-resourced a legal profession as we've got in the UK, to be actually able to realize some of those possibilities and play their full part. And Lawyers Against Poverty is very much an international movement. So we're looking forward to that. And I'd like to thank you, Lord Carnwath, for giving those ideas. I look forward to the conversations right across the country and with our colleagues in other countries as well, taking part and joining in, perhaps in the run-up to COP26. Perhaps we can invite you back in a year's time, possibly not during the conference itself, but in the run-up to it. And that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed the conversation. Sorry I couldn't choose any music.
We'll allow you to do that afterwards and post it in the chat. We might not be able to play it. Thank you very much. I'd like to hand back over to Emma Lough, our director now. Thank you.
In fact, I think it's to me, Joss. But what I wanted to say is a massive thank you to Joss and to Lord Carnwath for that inspirational chat. I hope you got a lot out of it, as I did, and will certainly be looking at some of those ideas and taking them forward with you. So thank you very much, both of you, for that. I'm just going to move on now to our next speaker, just to introduce Hadeel Abdel Aziz, who's a founding member and executive director of the Justice Centre for Legal Aid in Jordan. Now, JCLA have been funded by Lawyers Against Poverty to provide emergency protection services to women and girls experiencing gender-based violence during COVID-19. So I just want to hand over to Hadeel for 10 minutes so she can just talk to us and give us a bit of insight as to what that work involves. Over to you, Hadeel. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. By just briefly describing the system of why JCLA began or needed to be established. In Jordan, we do not have a national legal aid system. Statistics showed that 68% had to self-represent in criminal cases, even if they did not know the law. Our laws are quite complex. Our justice system is not easy to navigate, yet we do not have a public defender's office. We do not have institutionalized legal aid. Lawyers are only appointed to those who cannot afford one in cases that are punishable by, and felonies that are punishable by 10 years and more. Other than that, if you're poor, you're on your own. So as JCLA is a local NGO, our aim is to have a national system for legal aid in both criminal and civil cases in Jordan, which is, I understand, is quite an ambitious aim, but currently the system, as you would only imagine, and I don't have to lecture you on the impact of poverty when you cannot access the justice system. The way it's designed, it seems almost purposefully skewed against the poor. If you're poor, you're less likely to be able to access the system at all if you need protection. And when you do, you're less likely to be able to navigate it. And that, of course, add to that other vulnerability layers. Women are even more vulnerable, people who are uneducated, refugees. So you can only imagine what it means for a refugee woman who is uneducated and needs to issue documentations to herself or to her children, and without those documents, she cannot access even basic rights, including health, education, and so on. So we've been working since 2008, and it has been quite an uphill battle for us. COVID-19, like many other organizations, hit us really hard. Our funding was impacted, the need for our services was doubled. And we had also to think quickly and to establish systems that we never had, like to improve and strengthen our remote services. In Jordan during COVID, we had a very long lockdown. It was for 3 months, we did not leave the houses. And I can only tell you that crises don't impact people equally. It's quite significant to see how the poor are more likely to suffer. They are more likely to have lost their jobs. They are more likely to not have been protected. And therefore, if someone they don't have savings, their homes are not equipped, they're usually big families in very small houses. So they are more likely to break the curfew or to break the lockdown, which would then put them directly facing criminal charges, because we had a defense law, which is our emergency law, and those who broke the curfew were punishable by a fine that was 100 JDs only, but if you cannot afford it, it meant jail time. And I've read somewhere that during COVID, a small fine crime could mean a death sentence if you're in the wrong system. LAP supported us. We were in a real crisis because some of our funding had to be either cancelled or we could not access foreign funding approval process. In Jordan, the government of Jordan needs to give approval for each foreign funding. And since we rely heavily on international donors, because of course the government does not fund NGOs providing legal services. Unfortunately, the Bar Association also does not support us, or in fact, they fight us and they're trying to shut us down because they believe that legal aid is detrimental to the best interest of lawyers, but that's another issue. But like it seems that in time of crisis, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. LAP came to the rescue. They helped us, they channeled. It was not a big amount of funding, but it was significant in the sense that we could direct it to exactly to the most vulnerable, to where it was most needed, because what we needed was to fund our legal services directed at women who were impacted by the COVID crisis, specifically women who were victims of domestic abuse, who could not access the protection system, because again, it's very interesting to see how crises reveal your return on investment. What you invest in during peace times is when during crisis time, you actually get to see what you have invested. We had a weak protection system, and it just like all its weaknesses came to the surface during the lockdown and COVID. So women could not leave their houses. They were stuck with their abusers. And when they called 911, nobody came to their rescue. We established a protection hotline specifically, although our lawyers were not even allowed to leave the houses as well. However, we just like remotely kept pushing and pushing to ensure that the protection services would actually go pick up women from their homes. We gave online consultations, we did mediation over the phone, and we helped the most poor register on online platforms, because so many of the aid and interventions that the government offered, you had to register for using an internet-based platforms, and the people we served did not have internet. Many of them have not paid their bills and could not therefore access the services they most needed. So with LAP's support, we had resources to provide 600 services, mostly targeting women and the poor. You know, like 70% were women, but 30% men, and we targeted those who were most in need. Children were being picked up in the street for violating the lockdown, and then they were sent to the police. And although we have on paper, we have good legislation for juveniles law, but like in practice, you needed the guidance and the oversight of lawyers and legal activists in order to ensure that the system was not failing as horribly as it actually was, and to reduce the impact on migrant workers, for example. Refugees and migrants were the most likely to be fired in time, because job opportunities were lost. Many people were losing their jobs, and despite all the legislations and the defense law orders that were put in place in order to forbid people from losing their jobs, those were, in many cases, they were tailored in a way that would exclude refugees or would exclude migrants. Please, Richard, just like give me a sign when I have to wrap up.
You have a couple of minutes, Hadeel, no problem.
All right. It was very inspiring for me to read about LAP when we first came. when our partnership started, and listening today to Emma and looking at all of your efforts, is quite inspiring for me, because I am a firm believer that lawyers are like in a chain of justice where so many of the links are broken. Sometimes a well-trained lawyer is the only answer that we could afford. We cannot help and wait for justice until everything is fixed. But having a properly trained lawyer would mean that you could challenge detention orders, you could challenge forensic reports that were inaccurate, you could challenge, you could appeal decisions, and then you could navigate and issue documentations. So much of what you're doing today, for me, it's not only inspiring, but also it's very much needed. And the more you tap into or you reach out to other systems who are maybe less fortunate or less developed than your own, it means that not only opportunities will rise for financial support, which is quite important, but like even exchange of knowledge, exchange of ideas. The fact that you were discussing having this twinning systems, I mean, this is something that we could definitely copy or try to copy. Creating lawyers who had passion for justice, who could not tolerate injustice. This is, I think, the key for solving all our problems, because like an army of activists pushing against injustice in laws and in the systems would definitely give the voice that is needed for those we serve as JCLA. And so I am thankful, I thank you, and I hope that for the future we'll be able to do more, even not necessarily in funding, but definitely in learning and in reaching out to each other.
Thank you very much, Hadeel. Thank you for your inspiring description of the work that you do and an insight into it. I think it was really a really helpful, practical example of how we can work together, and how some of the money that we can provide goes to some really essential services that you provide. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm going to hand over now to my co-chair, Kirsty Wilson. We, Richard Dyton, me and Kirsty are co-chairs of Lawyers Against Poverty, and I'm going to hand over to her for our call to action, and then also for our second part of our event tonight. Over to you, Kirsty.
Good evening, Richard, and good evening to everybody else on the call. It's wonderful to see so many people joining us this evening. My next thank you is going to be very much to Hadeel for just our wonderful introduction to an insight into what a little bit of the Justice Fund can do. And I think your words, Hadeel, are going to be far more powerful than anything that I'm going to be able to say in the next few minutes about what we can do. But thank you so much. Now, my next thank you is going to be to everybody who's on this call who is already a member of Lawyers Against Poverty. As Emma said, tonight is not the beginning of Lawyers Against Poverty. It's almost like it's the next chapter. And whilst these are very challenging times, it's also a very exciting time for Lawyers Against Poverty, and taking forward some of the ideas that are already coming out from this evening about what we can do as a community of lawyers fighting against poverty. So thank you to all of you who are already members and who have already contributed to the Justice Fund. But I would ask, and it would be wonderful if everybody on the call tonight could give some thought to joining Lawyers Against Poverty if you're not already a member. We very much want to grow our membership and effectively grow the impact that we can have and grow the community that we are all a part of. And that will come on in the second half of this evening to have some fantastic examples of how giving time we can make things happen. We've got some wonderful speakers coming up from some of the work that's been done to date. But I think the Justice Fund is an important part of what Lawyers Against Poverty can do, and Hadeel brought that to life so powerfully just then. And so if you can consider becoming a member and giving a monthly amount from £5 a month, we would be very grateful. And maybe if I use a lawyer's phrase, if everybody tonight could just give due consideration to becoming a member and thinking about the Justice Fund, then that would be a wonderful achievement for this evening. You can find out more information as it's brought up on the screen there. So it's lawyersagainstpoverty.org. And we're also looking for ideas. That came out, Lord Carnwath and Joss was talking about ideas. And we're really keen to, for those ideas to come in. This is not, for example, Richard and I with ideas out. This is about the ideas of everybody on the call and everybody as part of Lawyers Against Poverty. So from how we can team up with, for example, in-house lawyers and looking at what Lawyers Against Poverty could do in conjunction with in-house teams, looking at working with firms as well. Yes, we're a community of individual lawyers, but we're very much looking to sort of write the next chapters of what Lawyers Against Poverty can do. So with that, again, thank you to everybody for joining this evening. And if we can now dive into the sort of second part of the session, where we look at some of the activities that have been happening in the focus groups. And first up, I'm going to ask Aid Henderson, who has been instrumental in the refugee confidence sessions and just taking an idea and running with it and just making this come alive and being a fantastic set of sessions. So Aid, if I could hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. Good evening, everyone. I want to start off by just saying that the idea of the refugee confidence sessions was not mine at all. It was actually my good friend Lou Arnold's, but for some reason I've been able to get away with taking the credit for it for about 3 years now, which is quite good. So how it began, how the legal confidence sessions began, they began around the genesis, the idea came around 3 or 4 years ago now. I personally have been involved with Lawyers Against Poverty for as long as I've been a lawyer. Actually longer. I think I was initially a trainee solicitor against poverty when it started, and at that time we were playing around with ideas of how to engage solicitors and barristers and students and others in sort of qualifiably useful projects whereby lawyers could use their skills in one of the ways which Lawyers Against Poverty wanted to meet the objectives of Lawyers Against Poverty. And we began thinking about support for the refugee community in the UK. And it became apparent from talking to people within the existing support network of the gap in knowledge and the gap in resources that were available to refugees after they had either gained refugee status or independent from that concern. Really in regarding their rights as residents and as individuals living in the UK, whilst traditionally the support that pro bono lawyers can provide to the refugee community is traditionally about 99% focused on status determination, which is of which there is an enormous need. However, quite often after status has been determined, refugees find themselves kind of alone in the big wide world of a new country where the systems are not known to them and are not obvious, and they can be quite understandably oblivious to what their rights are. So the refugee confidence sessions were really designed to try and plug that gap. We began talking and running focus groups with members of the refugee community through the support network that existed mainly in Oxford, where it started, and also in London, to try and look at developing a workshop program or a set of educational sessions, all focused on different areas of the law, in order to try and provide the participants with some level of confidence in how some of these things worked. And it's been really kind of building slowly but surely since then. We have designed programs looking at a number of different areas, such as the criminal justice system and the courts and the relationship with the police, through to employment law, family law, housing law, to provide people with practical information about how to protect their rights in these areas. One thing that the legal confidence sessions are not is that they are not legal clinics. So we are not advising people specifically on problems that they may be experiencing in certain areas. Rather, we are encouraging them to sometimes challenge the information that they may be given, particularly in contexts such as housing and employment, and to be able to be aware of what their basic rights are. We've had an interesting range of experiences in talking to different groups and different groups of people. They have ranged from people who have been in the country for a number of years, but still understandably feel somewhat marginalized, and for whom support network is still very much contained within the refugee community for obvious reasons, through to people who have arrived very recently, and for whom experiences within these different areas that we're focusing on is very much yet to come. And that's been a real eye-opener at times. I mean, there have been interesting discussions with people introducing sometimes the very concept of, for example, I mean, one example I always like talking about is family law, and that is introducing sometimes the very concept of family law to people for whom the idea that the state has jurisdiction over the family unit is quite an alien idea. So so that's been interesting, and so has debating with people who've been here with for a number of years about what their experiences have been in all of these different areas. We've also kind of talked about things which are, I suppose, to use a more specific legal term, sort of less law-y, I suppose, and more kind of about the basic points of social assimilation in the UK. So we've run sessions on, for example, social norms in Britain. We've run sessions on things like discriminatory attitudes in society, as well as doing more legally based sessions on the law of discrimination. The long-term ambition of the project is to roll it out nationwide. We haven't been doing too badly, given the fact that we haven't been going for very long. We've got active sessions in Oxford, in London, in Guildford, in Bristol, and we've got interested parties in Exeter and Manchester. The overall idea, the end game that we want here is we want to have a central bank of materials that our volunteers throughout the country can be trained on and then can run with wherever they happen to be, in partnership with local refugee support organisations. All the work that we've done so far has been in conjunction and in partnership with groups like Refugee Resource in Oxford, and the Islington Centre for Migrants and Refugees in North London, Bristol Refugee Rights in Bristol, and the local diocese in Guildford, who do a lot of interesting work with refugees in partnership with the University of Surrey. So the idea is that we would like people to be able to effectively run individual sessions all over the country like this. COVID's been an interesting interesting. It's had terrible euphemism. Interesting. COVID's been interesting, hasn't it? COVID's been interesting in the development of this because it's actually allowed us to kind of spread the gospel wider than I think we've been able to in the last couple of years, simply because location and distance and the practicalities of getting people together have actually proved to be slightly easier. Whether or not the impact of the sessions is equal, I think, is yet to be seen, because we're still in the infancy of doing this in the format that it's been run in 2020. It's also something that we are trying to be as evangelical as possible to our members about their involvement wherever they happen to be, and how they can get involved, and how they can link up with support organisations throughout the country, and how they can set up their own programs, set up their own sessions. And quite often I have people saying things like, well, I'd love to be involved, but I don't really know what I can do because I work in mergers and acquisitions. So that's hardly something that's going to be particularly helpful to the refugee community. And really it's also about what you're interested in and looking at your skill set and seeing how that can be properly utilised. So I talked about the fact that the programme is not merely a legal education programme; it is also a tool for social and legal assimilation, if that's not too lofty a way of describing it. So, for example, an example of that is we recently, with both the London and the Oxford group, I've run sessions on democratic participation in the UK, how voting works, how to get in contact with your local MP and your local councillor, and that's now being followed up by another session that we're running with the Oxford group that's involved that is involving a specific surgery with Oxford East MP and Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dodds, and we're encouraging the London group to do the same. So that is something that you do not need a necessarily specific legal expertise to facilitate. You simply need to be interested, and you basically need to be to be motivated enough really to get underway with that kind of thing. So that's effectively the long-term goal. The long-term goal really, it's sort of ripped off by, inspired by the Amnesty International Trainers Network, whereby there is effectively a central bank of materials that volunteers around the country can pick up and use once they have identified themselves and received training and possibly observed sessions that are already going ahead. It's a slow process, and obviously it relies on the goodwill and the time of jobbing lawyers. We all know that whereas goodwill is, as Lawyers Against Poverty have shown, is never in short supply, time and resources sometimes is. We're also looking in the long term to be able to get a bit more money under our belts in order that we can have more kind of full-time coordination of the project, because it's one thing organising the sessions and designing the sessions, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we all talked about how important democracy is, or how 0 hours contracts work, or how council housing works, but you have to be able to but the administrative side of that of establishing positive working relationships with refugee support organisations and designing programs whereby we can all kind of sit down and do that every Tuesday afternoon at 12:30 for an hour, does take significant more time and more sort of organizational head scratching than probably we probably naively didn't realize that at the beginning, but we sure enough know about it now. So effectively, I think I've been going for about 10 minutes now, haven't I? What I would encourage people to do, I've noticed I've got a couple of questions in the chat about people who are interested in talking more about this. Yes, I would be more than happy to be contacted about this. But that's ultimately where we are. So please do put your hand up if you wish to be more involved, because that's the more the merrier, and the more people, the more effective this project can be, because it really does run on the goodwill of volunteers. So that's all I have to say on the subject from now. So I will hand back to Kirsty.
Aid, thank you so much for that introduction, overview, and call to arms, because I think that's it is at that time there's been a fantastic amount of work done so far, as you say, probably more work than was anticipated at the beginning, but I think it's on the cusp of the takeoff. And I really would reiterate to everybody on the line tonight, and it's wonderful to see already people reaching out and saying, how can I get involved? And also for those on and others that you may know, because yes, Oxford, London, Guildford, Bristol, possibly Exeter is a good start, but there's plenty of other places around the country that we need to cover. But there's a lot of great material, and people aren't going to be left on their own starting from scratch. So if I could reiterate your call to arms as in terms of, and the more people we have giving a bit of time, the more it becomes an easier task for all. So
yeah, I think the other thing I would say is that it is one of those things that people some people find those kind of things easy, some people find them vaguely terrifying. All of the groups that I've worked with have it's been a fairly easy gig from that perspective, because you are working with people who have been very enthusiastic to receive the sessions.
Yeah.
With an enormous amount of gratitude from the people we've worked with, and the partnerships, creating a positive working relationship with those groups has been very satisfying and yeah, not that tricky either, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. So something that so if that is interest you at all, please do get in touch. You've got the contact details up there, and for admin at Lawyers Against Poverty, you will find Emma and the rest of us hiding behind that email address. So thank you, Aid. Now, going on to another example of Lawyers Against Poverty in action, and much more on an individual basis. I'm going to ask Pascal, who is one of our trustees and leads on our twinning program, and she's joined hopefully by Marina, who is one of the, to use the phrase, an LAP twin, and just to chat through about what actually twinning can mean and what it is in the context of Lawyers Against Poverty. So Pascal, over to you and Marina.
Thank you, Kirsty, and good evening to everyone who has joined us this evening. As Emma and others have said already, one of the main objectives of LAP is to connect lawyers and to build a community of lawyers who believe in the power of the law to bring about change and bring a fairer and more equitable world. And one of the ways through which Lawyers Against Poverty is trying to do this is twinning. So the basic idea is to connect UK-based lawyers with lawyers from less developed countries, so that they have an opportunity to develop professional and personal relationship, to support lawyers who have few resources and to gain insight into other legal system and cultures and working environments. And it's so I've said that it is twinning, so it's not a traditional mentoring program as such. It's very much a two-way relationship, and insofar as both twins take it in turn to coach and support the other twin in response to his or her needs and the goals that they've set themselves. It's semi-structured, so in very broad term, it involves lawyers committing to engage in approximately 10 remote sessions over a period of 1 year. And there is some facilitation along the way as and when needed, and also a support pack to provide guidance and tips on coaching and on goal setting. And so the twins set themselves 3 goals, typically at the beginning of their relationship. And we're not at all prescriptive as to what those might be. So they can be technical and legal. So for example, working on a joint project, or sharing legal resources or documentation and best practices. But it can also be about just acting as a sounding board from issues that crops up, exchanging ideas, giving career advice. We have, over the course of the years, had the opportunity and chance to partner with a number of very diverse and also very inspiring organizations. So just by way of example, our pilot project, in our pilot project, we we engaged with an organization in Tajikistan, an NGO which runs legal aid centers in rural areas of the countries, and works on issues such as domestic abuse and the rights of disabled people, etc. And so we've partnered some some lawyers based in the UK with some Tajik lawyers, primarily women. And then we have also, for a number of years, worked with the International Lawyers for Africa program. And again, there twin some lawyers from the UK with a number of with lawyers from a number of different African jurisdictions who had spent some time in the UK on secondment in different law firms, and had gone back into their own countries. And it was a more informal way of staying in touch with perhaps some of the connection communities there and lawyers they had met in the UK. And then more recently, we have also started doing some, creating some tuning in some pairs with universities, and which fits in well with also with our legal education theme and with the junior group of Lawyers Against Poverty. And we hope also has a potential of creating longer lasting and substantial relationships. I'm going to stop here and perhaps give Marina a chance to say a little bit more, to introduce herself, and also to tell us if she is happy to do that and how she became involved in Lawyers Against Poverty in the first place, and in the twinning in the first place. Marina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Pascal. It is a pleasure to reconnect in this forum. And I'm also happy to have joined in and listened to more about what goes on with Lawyers Against Poverty. I'm enlightened. Some of the things I was not aware about. I was not aware of, but now I'm glad that I have a broader picture of what Lawyers Against Poverty is all about. It's not just about the twinning opportunity that I was able to participate in, but it is more global. So my name is Marina Bwile. I'm based in Ethiopia. I'm a Kenyan qualified lawyer. I've been in Ethiopia for a couple of years now, more than a decade, just almost the amount of time I've been in the legal practice. I will not go into what I specialize in, but generally I do corporate work, and I'm also open to do other areas of law, and that is what actually motivated me to participate in the training opportunity that was presented to me. I came to know about it through colleagues I had met during a program in London. I was involved in ILFA. ILFA is an organization that also empowers, equips lawyers from Africa. And it was through that organization that I came to know about the training opportunity. My motivation for joining this program was to actually, the main motivation was to develop my coaching skills, because I understood that it was not just me gaining from the program. It was also an opportunity for me to become a coach. That is something I had never done before, and it was very, it inspired me to want to get an opportunity where I can be able to have a two-way relationship with someone not in my jurisdiction, but in another jurisdiction. Though it was a place where I had been before. I had interacted with lawyers from London. My work also involved working with lawyers from London and then other parts of the world. But this aspect where I'll be able to have a one-on-one conversation and just get to understand the intricacies of working in another legal system, tie it in with mine and make it make it more full was something that I did not want to let it pass by. I gained a lot from the program. For me, it was a good sounding board where I could voice what the difficulties I had, my expectations, goals I wanted to achieve, and I had not, for some reason, I've not been able to do. And once we get into those sessions, because we used to have calls every month, and during those sessions, we'll talk about what we aspired to achieve in a particular area of career, what we have done in the past, what we aspire to do in future. So it was a very good opportunity for me to be able to voice my goals and hear it back from my training, from my twin. And when I go back, I'm able to now fine tune and also become more clear and more focused on what other things I can do over and above what I do every other day. So it was a good opportunity for me to set goals, for me to also see that the challenges with career that I normally go through as a lawyer in Africa probably are the same as any other challenges when it comes to goal setting, career setting. People also go through in other jurisdictions. It's not restricted to only my continent. It is a global issue. When it comes to am I really comfortable with what I'm doing now? What do I want to do in future? These are things that we go through. All of us go through that. And when you have someone who you can talk to, someone who does almost the same thing as you do, but someone who can empathize with what you're going through and is keen to see you succeed, and you're also keen to see them succeed, it is very enriching. And I will encourage as many of us who can get to who can get the chance and the time to give it a shot. It will not be a waste of time. For for me now, I can confidently say I have a friend in London who I have learned a lot from, and who I'm sure learned something from me. Not only career-wise, but also socially, because for us, it was not just about work. It was also about life as a mother. How do you balance your career and your work responsibilities? How do you do that? And just comparing notes on what we are going through, both as mothers at homes and as career women, was very good, and it was very satisfying. I think that's all I have to say, unless there are any questions from Pascal.
Just to say, Marina, thank you so much for sharing so much about your experience and expectation and what you have gained from the twinning. It's great to hear. I was really interested to hear you say that you found it actually surprising to see how much you had in common, and this is something this is a theme that I have heard other twins say as well, which is a really good thing, actually. You know, people discover we have, as lawyers, we have indeed a lot in common wherever we're based and whatever stage of our career we are at. I think we have probably to stop here. I just want to say that if anyone is interested to find out more about the twinning or is interested in joining, please be in touch. Very happy to answer any questions you have. If you're not a member of LAP yet, you will first have to sign up and become a member, and then join. Many thanks.
Thank you, Pascal, and thank you, Marina, so much for joining this evening, and to both of you for explaining what twinning is and making it come alive in such a wonderful way. It's, as you say, it's not mentoring, it's not coaching, it's twinning, and it seems very clearly a friendship as well. So that's just wonderful to see. And as Aid said, maybe standing up and doing bigger presentations might not be something that you feel comfortable with, but this is very much an example of how you can get involved on a one-on-one basis as well, and a great example of that. So thank you to you both this evening for bringing that alive to the group this evening. So our final example of some of the great work that's been going on to date and what's coming up next is from our Junior Lawyers Network. And I should hopefully have Naomi Sander on the Zoom this evening, with hopefully Katrina as well from the International Book Facility. But if I could hand over to Naomi to let us know what the Junior Lawyers of LAP have been up to. And in particular, I'm staring out into the Zoom world at the moment.
Hi, Kirsty. Can you hear me?
There you
Perfect.
are. Nice to see you. Wonderful.
Good
if I can hand over to you now.
Sure. Thanks very much, Kirsty. So good evening. My name's Naomi Sander. I'm an associate in the project finance team at Gowling Law Firm in London, but I also lead the Junior Lawyers Network for Lawyers Against Poverty. So the Junior Lawyers Against Poverty Network, or JLAP as we call it, is the network of lawyers against poverty, especially designed for law students. So JLAP works on campuses across the UK and also in Africa to provide opportunities for law students to use their legal skills to fight for eradication of poverty and improved access to justice. So JLAP provides opportunities for law students interested in access to justice and human rights law, and helps them to gain real practical experience. And we do that through research projects, pro bono work, and other types of legal education projects that we facilitate on university campuses. And to date, hundreds of university students have participated in our JLAP programs. So some of our JLAP projects have included blog and article writing, online debates on contemporary issues relating to access to justice, We've had lots of guest speaker events, so careers workshops. We also run a twinning program specifically for law students so that they can twin with law students in other countries. And we also have quite a few fundraising activities that the law students participate in for the LAP Justice Fund as well. So JLAP runs these projects on campuses, but we also work with strategic partners to provide new opportunities for our JLAP students. One of the particularly successful partnerships has been a tie-up between JLAP and the International Law Book Facility, as Kirsty mentioned, so the ILBF. So we should have Katrina Crossley from ILBF here with us tonight, and we're very grateful for her for joining us to just have a quick discussion with me about how the ILBF and JLAP have worked together. And we've worked together for a few years now, and we're going to have a quick conversation between us about how that partnership's worked and what the future looks like for ILBF and JLAP. So Katrina, do I have you on the line?
You do. Thanks very much, Naomi.
Brilliant. So I'll just pass over to you to just do a bit of an introduction into ILBF.
Thanks very much, Naomi, and good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk a little bit about what I do at the International Law Book Facility. We're a small charity, and our mission is quite simple. It's to support the rule of law and access to justice for all through sharing legal knowledge. We're actually celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. And since we started in 2005, I think we've shipped something like 66,000 books to nearly 200 organisations in 54 countries across most of the continents of the world. And our books are donated from across the legal community, from students, from law firms, barristers' chambers, publishers, judges, courts, government departments. And we send those books to judiciaries, law schools, bar associations, law societies, and pro bono groups all over the world. That's pretty much what we do. It's a very, very simple mission, and I'm delighted that we have the chance to work with the JLAP students.
Brilliant, thanks Katrina. So my first question for you is just if you could give a bit of background for our audience tonight on how on the ways in which the JLAP groups and ILBF have been working together over the past few years, and how working with JLAP students has impacted ILBF.
So we've been working with JLAP since I think about 2016, when I was fortunate enough to meet JP Sweeney from Latham & Watkins, and JP Sweeney introduced me to Legal Lawyers Against Poverty and Josh Saunders, and we got talking about how the ILBF could work with the JLAP groups, and it was a very simple solution really. We work with the JLAP groups in the universities they collect books for the ILBF, which they then pack up and ship to some of the organisations that we support. And since we started, I think most notably the University of Nottingham JLAP group have been very successful. They've collected over 800 student textbooks, and their books have been shipped to universities in Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, and in Zimbabwe. And the impact of the ILBF has been particularly significant because it's given us access to really high quality student textbooks, which means that we can support universities and then university law departments where the demand for student textbooks continues to grow. And a very recent example of the impact that has had is that in Sierra Leone, one of the main universities there applied to their governing body to put on a master's programme, which they were successful in getting. And one of the reasons given for that was that was the quality of their library, which the ILBF and the students had been played a part in boosting. So very, very tangible impact in boosting libraries and access to good quality legal materials.
Great. And so how do you see the relationship with Junior Lawyers Against Poverty going forwards? Do you see new opportunities for collaboration between the two?
Yes, absolutely. I think that I've been very, very impressed, particularly this year, with a number of student groups that have come forwards who want to work with the ILBF. I think I'm working with 5 different universities this year, and they're doing all sorts of things, from collecting books from other students, from lecturers, from the libraries. They're also raising money to help pay for shipments. For example, the University of Surrey and the University of Law at Guildford are getting together and doing trying to cover the 5,000 miles between Guildford and Ghana to help raise money for shipments to that particular country. And students at Exeter, for example, are collecting books for one of the universities in Tanzania. And I'm just so inspired by the commitment of the students to this project, and they're full of great ideas. They don't see COVID as any particular barrier, unlike the rest of us who are struggling with coronavirus. They're overcoming those difficulties in all kinds of inventive ways. I just think the collaboration will grow. Just thinking about what we learned just recently, just now, about the mentoring program, there are all kinds of opportunities to introduce the students to their counterparts in the universities that they've been supporting, which is a very, very exciting for the future.
Yeah, one of the things that Junior Lawyers Against Poverty and Lawyers Against Poverty that we're always trying to do is to develop our opportunities for law students to gain practical experience that can help them go on to lead fulfilling careers in international law and in human rights law. So I just wanted to also ask about the benefits that you've seen for the students and also the lawyers and law schools in getting involved in some of these JLAP projects. What can our audience tonight kind of seek to benefit from if they were to also sign up and participate?
Well, apart from making a very tangible impact in terms of providing research materials for not just students, but the lecturers and the other academic staff, we take having access to materials for our studies for granted in the UK. But it's just not the case in so many countries around the world. And they don't always have access to that information online because of the poverty of the internet connection or all kinds of reasons. So that's a very tangible impact that you can make by making sure that contributing to to access to those invaluable materials. But also in terms of the students' own skills and getting involved in a project like this, they have to collect the books, they have to find somewhere to put the books, they then have to pack the books, they need to work collaboratively with their peers, they need to inspire other students to get involved, spend time fundraising if they want to. There are all kinds of skills that they're learning along the way that can contribute to their careers as lawyers, as well as learning about the value of pro bono and how to fit pro bono into their careers as lawyers, wherever that might be. And it's so important for so many people. And talking to lots of students this year, I can see that it's really important to them that as in the future, when they're practicing as lawyers, they want to be able to fit pro bono into their activities somewhere along the line. And I think that the idea of running the RBF, I have quite a wide network of lawyers from across the spectrum of the legal community, and it's great to be able to put people in touch with each other, because for me the biggest thing is partnership. We can do so much on our own, but as partners across organizations we can achieve incredible things, putting each other in touch with like-minded people, doing things that supplement projects that are already in train. And for me, hearing about the project in Jordan was so interesting. I mean, that's a country we've not sent books to Jordan, but maybe we will. It would be wonderful to do that. So I think it's great to hear about all of these projects and to just sort of broaden one's perspective to try and increase the impact that you have.
Brilliant, thank you, Katrina. The partnership that we've had with RBF has been extremely fruitful, and it's great to just always hear more about the work that the groups are doing together. So thank you for your time. I just wanted to quickly, before we finish, just flag one other program that we have mentioned already, which is mentoring. So we're hoping to launch a mentoring scheme for the JLAP students. It will just be a 30-minute mentoring session from a legal practitioner or a legal academic that could help a law student who's trying to get into an area of law that's really dependent upon networking and connections. So particularly human rights and the law of international development, those sorts of areas. So if there's anybody who would be willing to or interested in participating, being a mentor, please do join Lawyers Against Poverty and send an email through to either the admin email or to the Junior Lawyers email address, and we'll link you up with a student, and we'd really appreciate that. That would be a brilliant thing if we could get some sign-ups. So thank you very much.
Super. Thank you, Naomi, and thank you, Katrina, for joining as well. And I mean, it really is, it's a great example of how we can continue to build and grow the community of Lawyers Against Poverty, and JLAP has been such a success in relation to that. So thank you both for joining this evening. So I will now just hand back to Richard for a few closing words, and thank you to everybody for joining in. Richard, over to you for the wrap up.
Thank you so much for that, Kirsty. Yes, well, really just we've got 2 minutes. So I'm just going to thank all of our speakers. What a fantastic lineup it's been. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining. I hope you found it as inspiring as I did. And I wanted to just finally ask you to really consider carefully whether you could be a member. We'd love to increase the membership. If not, or if you do want to be a member as well, sign up to our mailing list. We haven't had time for questions and answers, but ask us a question, send any queries you have to the mailing address, which is on the screen. And just finally, just wanted to say a big thank you to our fabulous Chief Executive, Emma, who put all of this program together, sort of spoke to all of our speakers beforehand and made it all happen this evening. Thank you to you, Emma. Good night, and hope to see some of you soon. Bye-bye.